I've been talking to a lot of working moms lately, and I am honestly loving it. But I want to share with you one of these common things that I'm hearing them talk about. First, it starts on maternity leave. I usually get from moms who are feeling confident pumping, which is great. They're saying like, I'm pumping once a day on maternity leave and I get great output, so I'm really confident I'll be fine back to work. I'm like, good, yay. And then they go back to work and they often contact me about the second weekend. And they say something like this: things were going really well for the first week. I was getting great output, and now it's kind of starting to slowly go down and I'm freaking out and I don't know why. What's happening? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. I have labeled it the milk supply honeymoon phase of going back to work. Let's talk about what this is, why it happens, and how to fix it. If you're new to the channel, my name is Allison Tolman. I'm an IBCLC, which is a lactation consultant, and a breast pump expert. I'm also a mom of 3 little boys. I went back to work after my first one and it was not easy. And so now I work exclusively with working moms who are trying to combine breastfeeding and pumping to make this easier. Let's dive into today's topic. I think there's 2 reasons for this honeymoon milk supply phase that we're seeing a lot, especially in moms coming off of maternity leave. And here is what they are. The first one, pumping is easier at home. All right. And there's a lot of reasons for this. Pumping really is an art. Someone said that at a recent conference I went to, and I logged it away because it's 100% true. It's rarely just plug and play. I kind of thought it would be that way. I don't know, but it wasn't. And I think a lot of moms run into that. So if you're pumping occasionally in the comfort of your own home, there's a couple of things that you have going in your favor to make this easier. One, you're relaxed, right? You're home, you're familiar with the environment, there's familiar smells, familiar sights, and you can just relax and pump. And we tend to get better output, less pain. It's just easier that way. Usually the baby is near too. And like I said, pumping is an art. It's not all about just the mechanical things of slapping on the pump, press and play, and you go. A lot of pumping is mental too. And to get those good letdowns, to get good output, it takes some hormones, right? And when your baby is nearby, even just like in the home, again, you're relaxed, baby's close. It's just easier to get those letdowns, to get that milk supply out. There's also no pressure. And when you're pumping at home, you usually don't have those time constraints that you do when you're at work. You need to get back to your job. You only have this long of a break. And there's also usually less stress for output, right? So especially for moms who are feeding at the breast and just pumping occasionally, just kind of getting ready to go back to work, there's not this huge, like, if I don't get this milk out, my baby doesn't eat, or I have to give them formula, right? So there's just a lot less pressure, stress, and things like that when you're pumping at home. All right. And reason number 2 why this is a thing is because the baby is regulating your milk supply on maternity leave. All right. So this is a big deal. And we're going to talk more in depth about milk supply issues and kind of the variety of scenarios that we see on a separate video. But when you're feeding the baby at the breast during maternity leave, the baby is controlling your milk supply. Okay, so it's this natural cycle of supply and demand, and the baby's in control, especially if they're doing well at the breast and thriving. Especially by the end of your maternity leave, your milk supply is regulated, it's established, it's created what the baby needs, right? You can get away with some less optimal pumping practices because the milk supply is there and it just flows more easily, like we just talked about, right? So you can be pumping just like good enough and still get this like great output, and you're like, great, I totally get pumping, this is gonna be fine. You're also not seeing the milk at all. So when you're feeding baby at the breast, the baby's doing it, right? Not only are they controlling your milk supply, we don't really know how much they are drinking, at what varieties in the day. If they're growing well and thriving, you don't really have to worry about it. And mentally, that is really, really nice. Okay. I remember loving that about breastfeeding is once we got it figured out, you just kind of did it and you didn't have to stress. When you're pumping, especially when you go back to work, all of this comes together. You're no longer at home. You are on a time constraint. you have to get the milk out so that you can have milk for the next day for your baby. And now you are half baby dependent and half pump dependent with your milk supply. So this is kind of where we get into the weeds a little bit, because pumping is an art, like I said, and especially when you're combining breastfeeding and pumping together like working moms do, it can get tricky. So knowing these two things, it really makes sense that once your milk supply starts to be regulated by the pump and the baby, that we see more problems arise. If you're not actually pumping correctly or efficiently, that's when we start to see it is really that week 2 back to work. Week 3, the supply kind of starts just going down and down. This is exactly what happened to me. And I had a great pumping schedule. I was a nurse. I was a lactation counselor at the time. And I just kind of kept going down and down. And I didn't know how to fix it. It was really frustrating. I'll put a link up top if you want to learn more about that, why my pumping schedule didn't really work. And looking back, knowing what I know now, there are some simple yet important things I could have done to fix that. And that's where we are today. If you're feeling worried about going back to work, or you're already back and starting to struggle, that's what I do. I'm here to help you, right? In my program, I work exclusively with working moms doing exactly this. So if you want to talk with us and see if our program is a good fit for you, we would love to. There's a link down in the description to schedule a call with a member of my team. This is a really interesting little part of the lactation world, right? Because there's a lot of resources for breastfeeding mothers. Lactation consultants are trained on this. Like, I'm one, I know. We get zero pump training though, right? I'm also seeing a lot more information and resources available for exclusively pumping moms, which I'm loving to see that we're just having more, pride and like awareness and tips and support for pumping moms. But when you're combining them, it's tricky, right? That's where I live. So how do we fix this problem, right? Do we have to go through the honeymoon milk supply phase of back to work? Not necessarily. So there are 2 things that are really, really important to kind of avoid this scenario and not have to do this. Or if you're already in it, kind of getting back on track and fixing it. The first one is pumping efficiently. We have got to get all of the milk that is there out, right? And babies are really efficient at this. Pumps can be efficient at this if we use them correctly and just kind of enhance the way that they're designed. A pump cannot do all the things that a baby does. Biology has designed them to work very well at removing milk from the breasts. So sometimes we have to help the pump along because we don't want to be leaving milk behind. If you do that, your milk supply is going to decrease, right? Because the baby on the weekends and nights will keep it up to some degree. But then if we're not getting it out efficiently while you're at work, it's going to start going down little by little. And you might be able to make it to the year mark. I did. Even with that decrease, he was getting a couple of bottles of formula a day by the end. But I still had milk and we still breastfed fine on the weekends. But it just wasn't pumping right. Oh, it was so frustrating. The second thing that's really important on maybe not going through this honeymoon milk supply phase is pumping consistently. And this, I've noticed, really varies a lot job to job. If you have a desk job or a very predictable schedule, this is not a hard thing to do. And then we really work on pumping efficiently because your schedule's great, right? I have seen more and more mothers, though, where your schedule's sporadic. You have meetings that pop up. You're a doctor and you have patients. I work with a couple surgeons who are doing surgeries, long, unpredictable surgeries. You're a nurse on a busy floor. You're a teacher and they've scheduled you with no prep or no break from 8 to noon. How do we manage that pumping consistently in jobs like this? My approach is always a balance of science and practical. In fact, I want to show you these items that are on my desk all the time. They're sitting right in front of my computer to remind me of why I do what I do, right? I have these 2 things. This one is a breast model. You can see all those fun little ducks in there, everything we need. This is like the science part of it, right? And then I have this mom. This reminds me that breastfeeding and pumping and all of that stuff is hard. And it's not always the science, the mechanical part of making and removing milk, right? That's there. But how you feel and how do we put this into your schedule realistically is really important. Working moms cannot be pumping all through the night, right? Especially if your baby's sleeping. Like, this is just not practical. Is it good for milk supply? 100%. But is it good for your life? Is it practical in what you're doing? You have to go to work the next day. Probably not. So at what point can we stop doing that and just focus on how do we make the science work in a more practical way? This is the kind of thing that I love doing. I find a lot of joy in making processes more efficient and looking at the bigger picture. I don't know. That's just what my mind enjoys. So anyway, honeymoon milk supply phase. I hope that kind of gives you some information, at least, that I'm seeing this a lot. And honestly, it happened to me. And I would really like to avoid this scenario if we can, and or fix it if it's happening to you. So comment below and tell me, did this happen to you? If you have already gone back to work, did you have something like this? We also have a lot of moms that talk about their back to work experience on the podcast, and that's always a fun resource for working moms too. So if you want some help, please reach out to our team and talk to us. We're like super easygoing and we're here to help. Good luck pumping, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye.